Hello again, this is Spencer Colgan from Spencer Colgan is Wallpaper, and welcome back to my wallpaper and painting show on YouTube. In this video, I'll be going over some of the tips and tricks that I have for interior painting. You'll learn how to cut up against crown molding all around the perimeter of a wall, as you see here. And I'll also show you what methods I employ to mask, particularly to mask around molding and other trim. You'll learn how to use a roller efficiently, how to avoid what's called holidays or lap marks by keeping what's called a wet edge. And you'll learn the mechanics in the proper method of simply how to use a roller going straight up and straight down rather than in an X or a W motion as you see on some YouTube videos that always seem to find their way into painting video series. Anyway, we'll get into using a brush, a 9-inch roller, and also a small hot dog roller for cutting against the trim. So stay tuned for the video. Get some popcorn because it's a long one, and I hope you don't mind that. Please feel free to leave comments or questions below. And if you're a pro or a do-it-yourselfer, tell me how you do it. I'd love to hear your suggestions. Thank you for subscribing to my channel, and for those of you visiting for the first time, enjoy the video. If you wanted to get industrious, you could simply make a pocket out of your hand masking paper to keep all of these cover plates and the hardware in here. So we have 2 gallons of the same paint. Romance and romance. Are they the same exact colors? The code says they are, right? But if you paint one wall, cutting the bottom and the top with this, and rolling the rest of the wall with that, you'll see that they're not the same color. Because there's always a little drop more in this one than there is in this one. Human error, mechanical error. There's a little drop, and that's why we use this. It's called boxing the paint. We mix these two together here to make them one color. After you dump the contents into this, let the remainder of one can go into the other, and then take what you collect here, integrate it with this, and then pour some of this back into this so that you have a cut bucket. And you won't need something necessarily like that. I will use that, but if you didn't have one, you use the can. So we need to fill that in, right? Not only those cracks, but let's consider the tape itself like a crack. And I'm using here dab. You see how it seals the tape now? Now don't leave it like this. That's sloppy work. But always have a rag on hand when you come. You see, that's the way you want it, just like that. You don't want any edges visible when you're applying caulking. That's how you want it. You go all along. You
just keep doing the same thing. I just wiped it on the paper. Four-inch Purdy. We used it on one of the last videos. And now, I'm going to take one wall at a time. You see, if you're working alone, it's good to paint one wall at a time. Why not? Doesn't matter if we get paint on this wall at all over here. Doesn't matter. You got texture, go back and forth over that, back and forth, but finish it one direction. Again. Go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now watch this. I'm not going in this direction anymore because I'm going this way. It's gonna be hard to keep doing this. Not only that, if you're moving your body this way, painting this baseboard, or the bottom of the wall, we're not painting the baseboard. Here's what you really have to do, right? Now I'm gonna finish it this direction, because ideally, you want the whole thing that way. I only did it this way because it's easier. But then as you move along from the first 3 feet of the wall, you can't keep going back there. Secondly, if you did, look what would happen. If I kept going back, that's not only a waste of time, but look what you're doing to the paint. You'd see that if that were not textured. So you want to go this way. And where you left off over here, what's what you do? Watch this. It's like an airplane. Watch this. You come to the point where you left off. It's not this, look. No. Because then you got that. You're doing this. So let's recap. I start painting the bottom of my wall, back and forth, getting it into all of those textured areas, right? It doesn't matter how I go right now, I'm just getting it in there, right? Now, I have to go to the corner. I can't come here and hit this wall, right? Can't do that. So you go like this, just pull it out. But that's the last time you go in this direction. See, I'm moving this way. So now that I've painted 4 feet of it, I just come back from the edge of the 4 feet and just do this. Where I left off. Remember I painted over here and I went like this? So then, this is the whole job. You're gonna do the whole job like this. You go to the end and you go right to where you left off and lift off like an airplane, thereby reducing the lap marks that are created from the brush. Now, what about making the paint stippled the way the roller is going to make it? How do we do that? We have to be consistent. The brush helps us get the paint in this corner, but it doesn't help us match the texture with which we are applying the paint. Our brush makes it smooth. Even though you have texture under there, the brush, and you see the stroke marks? See that? That's what's happened down here. But if you want to make it right, which if you're a professional, you have to, you want to imitate the stipple. And the way to do it is to now recognize that the purpose of the brush was to get it into that fine little area, right or wrong. Now we're going to roll it, because the roller we're going to use is going to create stipples.
Now I just show you an example at this bottom using this small 4-inch roller. Just to make you understand at this point of the video how stippling the paint consistently is very important. But you don't have to use this 4-inch roller at the bottom. Remember, if you're rolling the wall, you're going to come down to the bottom anyway. So you could simply accomplish what I'm doing with this 4-inch roller with your 9-inch roller vertically. This, what I'm doing right here, is particularly important at the top where you can't get your roller close to the ceiling except within about 4 inches without hitting that ceiling. I just show you this so that you realize how important it is to keep the texture. And when I say texture, I'm talking about the marks that you put on the wall with your applicator. The roller makes a lifted texture effect. The better the roller, the less texture you're going to make on your wall. So I suggest that you employ this technique at the very top of the wall.
Same rule applies with the roller. I'm going back and forth, back and forth. But when I finish, now I can go all the way over to my corner. How many times am I going to pull it? Just once. You're not doing that more than once. There's no need to. Don't finish it off doing this. That is a mess. And look at all of the unevenness in the application. And so, we apply our paint again with the brush. Yes, I'm going over where I just rolled just a bit. Back and forth with my brush. Really, the brush is just getting it in there. Because, can I really get the paint into that corner with this? No, don't try it. You can't do it professionally. You can force it in there, but that's a messy job to do it like that. Back and forth, back and forth. And now, I simply take my roller, and I finish it off like this. You go this way. There you go. And you do the same thing. You lift off like an airplane, look. And if you want to remember where you left off, you just make it a mark like that. And over here, you want to remember where you have to do your lift off and your overlap, okay? You see how the roller doesn't get in there? That's why we use the brush here, okay? So that the brush can get in there like this. Who could deny, right? And then we dress it up with this. Right? Now, just to prove my point about how effective this caulking system is, let's lift our tape from the trim and look at the beautiful finish that we get when we protect our trim with tape and caulking.
When you have paint that remains from a sloppy application of paint from the previous painter, don't bring your pink paint all the way out onto the woodwork trim. Just simply touch that up with white after the pink is dry.
Now, cutting the top here is a different skill set altogether. I had a caulk up here, there were cracks in there, so you'll see this whitish shiny stuff is just caulking. This is something you want to practice before you start it yourself. Now we're on textured wall, of course. So the roller issue is not as important on this wall as it is on a flat wall. And you'll see that issue I mentioned in a video I put out in December or November called How to Avoid the Halo Effect. So I start a few inches down, right? Again, it doesn't matter if I get paint on this wall over here, but now you see somebody got paint on the trim. Sloppy, sloppy. I knock my excess off and I just go up to that corner there. And I start pulling a straight line. And really what you have to do is paint over the previous painter's mistake, because they were very excessive with their hand movement. And once we're out of the corner, we could move a little faster, right? And we could also go in the opposite direction. Again, the finished direction is not back and forth. It's going to be the same direction. All right. Okay. I'm holding my brush like this. You don't want to go too fast there. You just want to bring that color up onto the trim, right? You don't want to go excessively slow. Your hand starts to shake. Now look what I mean by the one direction. Watch this. I clean up my edges. And now look what I do. I pull the paint in one direction. No more back and forth. We've already cut it. We're just laying the paint out so that it doesn't have all that brush mark back and forth. And then to replace the stipple, I'm going to roll it as close as I can to the edge without touching it. And now my wall, after I get all this done, we'll be ready for this with my roller. Not this size, but you know what I mean. And you go all the way up and then down, all the way up. The idea being that this is stipple going vertically, and now we have stipple this way. But think about it. Even the finish of the entire wall with the roller, you want it all the way up and then down. Why is that? You want to make it look like you painted the wall in the same direction, going all the way up, right to the border. And then it looks like you rolled the whole thing because you have all the same texture.
I just have a couple of thoughts that came to mind as I edited the video. When you're considering painting the top of a wall with the brush, as I just showed you, when I go back and forth cutting up against the crown molding, I'm getting the paint in there and I'm pulling it. I'm a lefty, so I'm pulling it from the right to the left, and then you'll see me go back and forth on the wall. It's just, I'm knocking paint off of the brush. I go back up. I might cut now from left to right because I'm using the brush to give me more paint on the other side of the bristles. That's all I'm doing. I don't want you to get confused. But essentially what we're doing at the top of the wall is we're cutting right up against the crown with the brush. Then we're coming in, then I pull, like I showed you down below, I pull the paint with the brush in one direction, getting all of that paint to be flowing in the same light path. It's all about how the light hits the paint. So I go back and I pull my paint from the corner out about a couple of feet or so. Then I start going from my left to my right. I start pulling the brush from my right to my left, finishing the paint in one direction. Then I get my roller in there and I do the same thing. Even though I start on the right, I eventually start getting that roller to move from left to right, and I lift off like the airplane method, right? But then, after I get my paint into the corner against the crown, and then I get my stipple with my roller, my little roller, after I get that as close to the crown as I can, now the paint direction and my stipple is taken care of at the top. The only thing left I have to do is bring my 9-inch roller as close to the top as I can, because I've painted right next to the crown with the brush, and I've created the stipple effect as close to the crown as I can without hitting it with my 9-inch roller. The 9-inch roller does the rest. And that's why we're using 3 applicators near the top. The brush to get into the corner where the crown meets the wall, the roller to create the stipple effect, and the 9-inch roller so that we can go get it done in one day, right?
Once again, I want to emphasize the benefits of having, first of all, a ladder bucket from which you can operate and hold things. And in this case, I'm holding my cut bucket. There are cut buckets that fit right into the Werner ladder. Just too small for what I'm doing right now because I'm using a 4-inch. But for what I'm doing right now, this is not the speed of a professional, what I'm doing right now. This is the speed of a teacher, teaching good people who want to know. And that I put in there for those folks who like to leave sometimes nasty remarks about how long it takes me to paint or whatever. People are just so uncharitable with their remarks, and they're so blindsided by the fact that they think they know what you're trying to accomplish in the video. I'm talking to people who don't know how to paint, that want to learn how to paint. First of all, if I were doing this professionally, I wouldn't be holding a camera and I would be moving something like this kind of speed right here. And then you turn it around and come back the other direction so that you can hit both sides of this texture. I can't even go as fast as I want because I'm holding the camera. Texture is a challenge because you have to wiggle the brush without messing up your line. I got that word wiggle from one of the Brits who paint online. I watch his channel, Aubrey, nice guy. So once again, you take your roller. Now why am I doing the roller? Why am I doing it? Because the rest of this wall is being painted with a roller, right? So if I made my mark, right? I know where I got to do my lift off. It's right here because this is drying, setting up. So then I come really close to the ceiling. I can go back and forth like this to mash it in there, right? But I'm going to finish it off in one direction, as close to that crown as I can get. And then watch this. Look, I'm down here. Watch this. I lift off. Not like this. Not like this, but like this. Like an airplane. This way, you feather in this section of the paint with the one that's setting up. And you never want to roll backwards on accident. Imagine an airplane taking off, went backwards, what would happen? Oh, forget it. Here's a tip for you when you're using a brush. You see that unprotected floor there? That's not a great thing. But a professional can avoid getting paint on it. Here's how not to paint this. I'm going to do it over here, watch. Just imagine my brush is in this corner. Watch this. Why not? Why can't I do it like this? Let's show you what the brush is really doing when you do this. Watch this. Slow motion. You see all this flicking going on?
That's a lot of paint you're flicking onto the floor. Just be careful not to let it be you who does that.
Do it fast now. You can imagine how many specks of paint are now down there because of this. Look. Slow motion. You know when you're drying your hands off in the sink and you do this with your fingers? That's what you're doing here. So, if you were going to be lazy and not cover your floor there, or if you realize, oh my gosh, my drop cloth moved, here's how you would want to do it. Look. What am I doing differently here? First of all, my brush is not lifting off of that wall, look. There's no flicking, did you see that? Look at the transition in the direction, watch. And therefore, it's not gonna flick anything, watch. Or you go in one direction. Or you go from the bottom up, same direction. There's no flicking. It's just something to keep in mind when you're flicking paint and you're like, how did that get on there? That's how you're doing it, you're flicking. So to prevent that, just put our rag right underneath us, right? And then we can go back to moving quickly without flicking onto the floor and instead onto a protected surface.
Now we get to painting the wall speedily with a 9-inch roller, or perhaps you have an 18 or a 14. Our perimeter is done, right? We've second coated our perimeter. If you haven't, you want to give it 2 coats. You never want to paint anything with 1 coat, please. I really can't stand when people say, oh, this paint covers in 1 coat. I hear homeowners tell me that, and I say, oh no, I don't paint with 1 coat. It never covers. Now, let's talk about keeping a wet edge. Keeping a wet edge simply refers to moving along, painting, while the columns of paint that you create with your 9-inch roller stay wet. That is, if I paint 4 feet of wall, I don't take a break and come back. The paint needs to be consistent as we move along the wall. You see that section right there? 4 feet of section right there. From the right side to where it's right there, where it's blotched with paint. If I all of a sudden stopped and took a phone call, like helpers do, while they're painting for you, that's why helpers are no good. If I all of a sudden stopped there and took more than 1 to 2 minutes of an interruption, let me tell you something. Paint the whole wall for your customer after that. That stop is going to show. The only thing you should be stopping to do while you paint a wall or a ceiling is to dip into the bucket from which you're drawing your paint. I'm telling you, paint starts to set up after a minute. After your roller stops applying the paint, within a minute, it's leveling off. All liquids have a certain degree of ability to self-level. Your paint is self-leveling within 60 seconds after you put it on a wall or a ceiling. If after 60 seconds you go back and hit it, it'll re-level again because it's still very wet. But you just interfered with self-leveling. Anything beyond that, now you're interfering with the paint setting up and drying, because then the liquid starts to evaporate. You don't want to do that. You have to keep the edge wet, meaning not only wet, but also at the same point of drying. And drying starts when the paint begins to self-level and then starts evaporating its liquid. Okay? So as you're rolling, when you finish off with your last stroke from top to bottom, the only time you can touch the column that you just finished is immediately after you finish it by going over it 50%. In other words, each column of paint that you apply from top to bottom is as wide as your roller. In this case, we're using a 9-inch roller. Each lap is 9 inches. When I complete my 9-inch lap from ceiling to floor, now I have 9 inches of paint on the wall, right? I then move my roller toward the unpainted surface, but only halfway. I'm going to cover what I just did by 50%. So that's 4.5 inches. I paint 9 inches according to the width of my roller. My next column, I overlap it by half. That's the way you do it.
Now, who says that we should roll this wall right now? I'll give you one hint. It only has one coat of cutting all around it. Who says now that we should roll it? Who says that we should cut it once again and then roll it while the cut is wet? Or who says that we should cut it again, wait till the cut dries, and then roll it? The first and second coat, after the cuts have 2 coats. If you said to cut the entire area again, and while the cut is wet, roll it, the first coat, and then the second coat, right after it, you're right. Do you have to wait for paint to dry to put a second coat on? Who told you that? I asked one guy that. I said, who told you that? I said, your dad? He says, I think so. I said, look at your second coat as you're putting it on. Are you removing the first coat? No. So why are you waiting until it dries? Let's stop doing things that Grandpa used to say to do. And let's start getting it done right. Sorry, Grandpa.
Okay, so we have our perimeter done with its first coat. I'm now going to apply the second coat. And now you can move faster because there's something about new paint that allows the second coat to go over more quickly. And so you can glide through the cut very nicely. And another thing is, you want to keep the entire perimeter wet. As we spoke in the last segment about the wet edge, the reason why you keep the wet edge is in order to keep the paint with a universal appearance. In order to keep the paint with a universal appearance throughout the entire wall, it has to be applied with the same applicator. That's why we use the brush, the 4-inch roller, and the 9-inch roller. The 9-inch roller pretty much went over everything after the tiny applicators got the paint in those areas where we couldn't reach with the 9-inch roller. Therefore, ideally, you only want to use one applicator, a 9-inch roller. But since we know that's impossible, we have to use the smaller applicators to get into those areas where the 9-inch can't. Secondly, keeping the wet edge applies to the perimeter and the rest of the wall as well. Behind my body now is paint that's setting up. Now the room is really humid. The wall that's in front of my ladder was skim coated, and all of the evaporation is taking place, and the room is damp, and that slows down the drying process of the paint. But let me tell you something. Ideally, you got 2 people doing this. Ideally. One on the top, one on the bottom. You see where I am at the top? Your helper would be down at the bottom to the left. Do you know that I had a helper that was trying to get onto the right-hand side of the wall right now, at the bottom, beneath my ladder? I kid you not. I had a helper. I said, you're going to do the bottom, I'm going to do the top. He's trying to get his brush around my ladder. I'm considering taking this comment out for those who might be like, why is he saying this? I mean, if you can enjoy some of this stuff, enjoy it. Isn't that ridiculous? I told my helper, you do the bottom, I do the top. For some unknown reason to me, he forgot that there was a bottom left of the wall. He decided to work on the same side of the wall I was working on. Me being at the top, he's trying to negotiate around a ladder. I said, what are you doing? He said, you told me to do the bottom. I said, the wall is 15 feet. Why don't you do the other side? So, needless to say, if you're wondering why I'm doing this alone, it's because of that. All right? Long story short. And so we're doing the perimeter. Now, this happens to be a small wall, right? Spencer can take care of this, and so can you. Move your brush quickly. Get around. Remember I said the second coat goes real quick. Get that thing wet. I know the humidity is going to sustain the moisture in my paint. If it weren't the case, Spencer wouldn't be doing it this way. Trust me when I tell you. And so I'm moving quickly around the perimeter, giving it a second coat. And now, and you don't have to do the bottom, by the way. You just have to do the top, because the top is going to be the point at which your roller can't really get to. Of all the parts of the wall, it's the top. Your roller can't go all the way up. On the side, your roller can go right up against the side. They have rollers now with the fuzzy on the edge of the roller, and it acts like the rest of the roller. So we go straight up and straight down. Why did I start away from the pink? Do you want to bring a loaded roller right up against where you just laid out the paint? Do you think it would be proportionately equal in terms of thickness, or what we call millage of the paint? It wouldn't. If you took a loaded roller, like I'm doing right here, and you brought it right up against the pink, guess what? You would have a disproportionate amount of paint applied near where you left off. This does not go against what I said, keeping a wet edge. Look where I joined the two, right there. That's all wet there, equally wet, right? Now look, I'm not going to the bottom. What's going on? Spencer's going to go over it. He's going to go back to where he started and go up and all the way down. Remember, this is our first coat. Again, I start away and then I come back. It looks like I'm painting backwards, right? But no, I go all the way up, all the way down, all the way up, all the way down, up, down. What you can't see in this video is that I'm discontinuing contact with the wall with my roller. I'm not rolling up, down like in the form of a V. I'm lifting the roller off the wall when I get to the bottom. You know why? You'll see that nonsense when it dries, that V nonsense that painters do. Take the roller off of the wall when you get down to the bottom. Off. You see that when you get down there? Off, and then go back to the top. That's how you do it right. You want to do a perfect job? Please take my suggestion.
The entire wall is wet. The perimeter has 2 coats of paint. They were brushed, and as you saw, they were rolled. The entire wall right now has the same texture from the paint applicator, meaning that although the perimeter was done with a brush, it was finished with a roller. And so nobody will see any flashing of the paint texture anywhere. Even though you have a textured finish underneath the paint, the texture of your paint will all be the same. And now we'll put on the second coat.
So we begin our second coat. And as we saw with the smaller applicators, that is the smaller roller and the brush, the second coat goes quicker because you've already covered the initial paint with brand new paint. And so what I'm doing is just carefully going next to that white door and its frame. If you roll too quickly, you'll have paint splatter all over that door. So you move not as quickly as you would the rest of the door. Again, I lift my roller at the bottom, right there. I lift off. Again, right there. I'm lifting off. You can't see it, but I am. If I had somebody take the video, they would certainly highlight that action. And now look where I start again. I start at least a column over to the right. Then I come back, touch my wet edge. Now notice how I don't go too far past it. I'm right there. I'm on it now. I'm overlapping 50% of my last wet column, and I got it all done within 60 seconds, of course. I'd say it's more like 25 seconds, right? I'm going up and down, lifting the roller at the bottom off of the wall. We don't want any connecting columns. You can see that action on sloppy paint jobs. I don't like it. By the way, this is a satin finish by Sherwin-Williams. This is their Emerald collection. It's very fine paint. But let me tell you something. I don't represent Sherwin-Williams, and if you wanted to buy paint for $40 a gallon from Home Depot, I'm all for it. It's called Ultra. It has the primer and the paint. It is excellent paint. Kudos to Home Depot. Over the last 12 years or so, they've really perfected their paint products, I have to say. Home Depot, it's their Behr paint, B-E-H-R, and it's the Ultra. You got to get the Ultra. And it goes for about $40 in the continental USA. Okay, now a couple of thoughts as I watch myself do this. You see the arm that goes from my pole to the fuzzy roller. I say fuzzy roller because a lot of people don't know. It's called a sleeve. Okay, so the roller, right? You see that metal arm on the right? That is receiving the power of my arm and the pressure I apply to the pole. That edge that has the metallic arm or the elbow, that's going to get more pressure on that side. So you want to be aware of that while you're painting. And you want to adjust your wrist so as to equally distribute the pressure that's on that roller so that one side with the arm doesn't take a disproportionate amount of pressure, causing what's called edging, where you create a visible, ugly edge because of the disproportionate pressure that you're pushing onto the roller. The way to do that is to simply be conscientious as you're painting and use your wrist on the pole to distribute the pressure equally. Okay? Or, if you're not good at that, you just let the roller fall on the wall. Now that's a little bit of an advanced technique. When I say you let it fall, you bring it up strongly with two hands on that pole, and then you square with the wall, your body, and the roller especially, so that your column doesn't curve and that it goes straight from the top and straight to the bottom. If you do that, your roller is square with the wall. And if you just let the roller and gravity take the roller down, you won't be putting an unequal amount of pressure on either side of the roller. And so there we have the second coat. Now, after I painted this pink wall, I came to the conclusion that because of the color differential of the blue underneath it, this wall would get a third coat. Perhaps you can't see it in the video. It's very subtle, but a painter can spot it. So even though it looks gorgeous in terms of application, you may not like the color, but this came out perfectly according to the way we paint walls inside.
Go back and see where I started the paint. with the roller. When I first started the wall, did I start right there? Didn't I start right around here and bring it over? The roller is loaded with paint. You don't want to bring a loaded roller too close to any one of your edges. And as you're going along, and if you stop here on the wall, when you load the roller up, you don't want to start right to the right of the paintbrush. You want to start over here and bring it to the paintbrush, and then come back to the paintbrush, roll down, and make columns. Roll down from top all the way to the bottom. Look at the pattern and rewind the video and see what I'm talking about. It's very important to get a layout that has no lap marks. You have no lap marks here. You can't see where the roller made its columns of paint. And now it's all drying at the same time because it's all wet together. And that's the key to painting successfully one wall. And this is my one wall at a time method. Now we do the same to this wall. Look at how nicely the caulking system works.
Just anticipating a question from viewers on this method right now. They'll usually say, how long before I pull the tape? As soon as possible. Don't let it set up. Pull the tape off while the paint is wet, yes. I know you're going to do 2 coats. You want to pull this paint off ASAP. Otherwise, you'll have what's called bridging.
Now you asked me in the videos, when do I take this off? Right away. Did everyone hear it? Right away. Now for those of you who watched this video, look on the bottom and see if somebody asked the question, hey, when should you take the masking off? You see, they don't watch the video and then they want you to spend the time to answer their questions that are answered in the video. Right away. If you don't take it off right away,
you'll have what's called bridging, which is the paint on the wall becomes one with the paint on the tape. And then you go to remove it, and what happens? Oh, disaster. You start peeling off of the paint off of the wall. Oh, and then you have a repair on your hands at the end of the job. It's a disaster. If something happened or the drying time accelerated because of the temperature in the room, do yourself a favor. Take a straight edge and slice just above the tape. It's tedious, but you can do it. If your paint happens to dry and it is glossy, semi-glossy, or even eggshell, it's going to form a bond between wall and tape. You want to slice through it. If you take the tape off quickly, you won't have that trouble. And so I just give you that tip so that what has happened to me in the past doesn't happen to you.